What's up, mortgage coach community? Dave Savage, and I have my co-host for this very special interview, Mr. Rene Rodriguez. What's up, brother?
How are you? Good to be here.
I'm
Excited for
good.
today, actually.
Say that again.
I'm excited for today.
I am too, man. I am really looking forward to interviewing this amazing author, Brendan Kane, guys. This book is trending in the mortgage coach community. The book is Hook Point, and then the subtitle is How to Stand Out in a 3 Second World. So I think that's something we can all relate to. Uh, we live in a ADD, information overload, 3 second world. And then he's also the author of a book. Is it A Million Followers and How You Built a Million Followers in 30 days?
Yeah, it's called 1 million followers.
It's crazy. And you really did it in 30 days.
Yeah.
So that's mind boggling. Now that book, I've heard a lot of folks where I told them about this book and they're like, oh, is he the guy that did the million followers? So it sounds like in the mortgage and real estate space, that book trended quite a bit. Would you say that's pretty fair to say?
Yeah, we do some work with Gary Keller, and he's been a huge proponent for both of the books. So I think that's where it's really gained some steam in the real estate world.
Well, Gary Keller is a very big name in the real estate world, largest real estate company in the world, although he is getting some competition with EXP and a few other folks. So, so Brennan, I want you to think when you answer the questions, the primary audience here are mortgage professionals, and they are using social media, one, to get to consumers, a lot of first-time home buyers. So we're seeing everything from first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, but then they're also looking to build relationships with realtors. So think of the content, that's the audience. And also they're trying to just get ideas so they can come to realtors and go, hey, I got an idea for you. So that's going to be the course of the questions. So Renee, I'll let you go first on the questions you want to ask, and then I'll pepper in some questions from the community.
For sure. Well, I mean, your opening paragraphs were what caught me. And I mean, talk about living your brand of hooking us right away. And I think that creates a great frame for why listeners need to listen to everything that Brendan is going to be talking about, because it's the reality of the world that we live in right now. And I'm just going to quote these right from your book, that right now we're getting more than 60 million billion messages sent out on social media platforms today. You said that here we have right now that interacting with, we scroll through 300 feet of content. We check our phones 1,500 times a week. Inboxes, we're checking 30 times an hour. 400 new users every day on Facebook, 317 status updates, 147,000 uploaded videos, 54,000 shared links, more than 500 hours of content on YouTube, and more than 40,000 songs shared are uploaded to Spotify every day. That's the world we live in. I mean, talk to us about what we have to go into today's world with our message in a crowded space. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, as you just pointed out, the landscape has shifted dramatically, yet marketing hasn't changed to match that. So with all those stats, just think back to pre-social media 20 years ago. Maybe there's a million content creators on the planet because content distribution was heavily regulated. You had to go through magazines, newspapers, television stations to get a message out. So not everybody had a voice. But today, fast forward, 20 years, and we now have 3.96 billion content creators on the planet. So we went from a million to 3.96 billion in less than 20 years, with each person creating content for the people that they care about most. So even if you are in a specific market like mortgage or real estate, it doesn't mean you are just competing against your direct competitors. Now you're competing against every piece of content that's published to grab that initial attention and take them on that user journey or that story that you're trying to get across and tell.
Yeah, I love that, because I think you referenced in the book that in the past, movie creators and filmmakers were just competing against other movie creators and filmmakers. Now they're competing against us for attention. And what I didn't even put together is what you just said, which is that means that we now aren't saying, oh yeah, I'm competing with them. I'm competing with almost half of the world's population of putting content out there. I think that's incredible. So for me, if I'm sitting here as a listener, how does someone begin? Because at Hook Point, I mean, you're really talking about how do you capture someone's attention in 3 seconds. If I'm listening to this, how do I begin? How do we hook our audience with this?
Well, the first place you got to start is with research. You've got to understand is most people will use social media or they'll use advertising without ever studying it. So first off, you have to become an active consumer of the content you're consuming on these platforms. Why does a video stop you and get you to share it with your friend? Why do you comment on something? Why do you not comment or like or share something? So that's the first place, and start studying what really grabs your attention and also what doesn't grab your attention. Because if you don't start studying that and understand and learn that, then you're never going to get good at doing it yourself. So like one of the exercises that we give is if you're just starting out with this, start pulling headlines or meme cards or captions from content that you consume, you engage with. And it does not have to be in your industry. Most of the times I would say start outside of your industry and start plugging your products or services into it. So for example, like the 4-hour work week or Hook Point or 1 million followers, whatever you may be pulling or consuming, extract that and figure out how do I plug my content, my service into that. So that's one step.
The second one by plug in though, can I just ask that question? Like, how do we plug in? What do you mean by that?
Plug in your products or services. How can what you offer the world be put into that same structure, that same headline, that same title?
Structure.
So kind of like news hacking. Take trending concepts and ideas, put a headline around that as much as you can, and then insert your concepts within that. Is that fair enough?
Yes. And I'm not necessarily saying that you use it, but it's a good exercise to start getting good at it. So one of my friends that's in the book, Craig Clemens, who's one of the top copywriters in the world, his company does about $1 million a day in revenue. And when he first started out as a copywriter, he was horrible. And so he literally just did that. He found the best headlines, took them, put them into a document, and start figuring out how can I make this work for the products and services that I'm selling. So that's one of the first steps. The second step is you have to understand and identify and research the pattern of your industry. So look at all of the other people that you're competing against. What content are they putting on their social channels? Go into their Facebook ad library. What ads are they running? Type search terms into Google, see what ads come up, because you cannot stand out if you fall into the same pattern as everybody else. And you can't break the pattern. You can't stand out until you understand the pattern. So this is a lot of the work that we're doing in the real estate market. There are very clear patterns of how people sell homes. It's just sold, just listed. And if you're doing the same thing as everybody else, it's going to be very hard to stand out. I'm not saying that you can't have some success, but if you want to really beat out the competition, rise to the top, you've really got to study, identify how are other people articulating their value proposition? How are they articulating their company, their services? And then you can start breaking the mold and making sure you're not doing the same thing as them. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is they just keep copying everybody else.
Let me ask you something on that. So you spoke at our Modern Real Estate Summit, and we had Ryan Serhant, who's the #1 real estate brand in the country. And one of the things that we teach people to do, and they do it, but I know we need to do more than this, is, hey, follow Ryan. And then, of course, in the mortgage space, we have people that have prolific YouTube channels, Kelly Zitlow, Denise Donahue, a lot of these great. So you want to follow people within your space, but then you also need to follow people outside your space. What would be some suggestions for a mortgage and real estate professional on some thought leaders that they should follow, or some industries that they should follow outside of the mortgage and real estate space? Any specific things come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a channel by a young kid named Graham Stephan who does really good jobs with hook points in terms of making finance digestible for the younger audience. There's another great channel called Clear Tax Value. Both of those are on YouTube. They've made tax very sexy. There's also Dr. Mike, who's on, he does really well on YouTube as well. That, again, he makes being a medical doctor interesting and standing out. So those are some channels that come to mind at the top of my head. There's another one that's kind of interesting is World Economic Forum. They're hit or miss in terms of their content, but they have had some really big wins. So I would look at the way that they structure their content on Instagram and Facebook.
So my takeaway from that, guys, is look for other industries that are similar to us. Like, who is the number one insurance salesperson on YouTube? Who is the number one tax person on YouTube? And by the way, you did call out YouTube. Was that just because those are what came to mind? Or do you think that if you were a mortgage professional, like YouTube should be a real priority platform for them? Or those were just the first people you thought of?
So if you're doing mortgage, and I would assume people are doing a very specific geolocation, is that accurate?
There's exceptions to that. Sometimes it's a category like medical professions or military, but yeah, our audience are local, referral-based mortgage professionals.
Yeah, so I would not focus. So I would focus initially on Facebook and Instagram ads, and then secondarily pay-per-click advertising, and then third, potentially YouTube advertising. I wouldn't put a tremendous amount of focus and energy into organic until you get paid working for you. And this is why, is the algorithms have a very difficult job. Now, we probably heard this term. There's a lot of stress, anxiety, and disinformation about what this is. And I'm just going to break it down simply into it. The algorithms have one job and one job only. That is to keep people on the platform longer. That is how they make money. The longer people stay on the platform, the more ads they can serve to them. And going back to the initial stat that I had pointed out, with 3.96 billion content creators on the planet and upwards of 60 billion, now it's probably over 100 billion messages sent out on these platforms every day, the algorithms have a very difficult job. Because when any of us open up a social media platform, there's probably over 1,000 pieces of content that could seed to us based on the people we're following, the content we've engaged with. So those algorithms obviously cannot seed you 1,000 pieces of content as soon as you open up one of these platforms, because you'd be overwhelmed and you'd leave. So it has to prioritize, what are the first 15 posts I'm going to seed to this person? Because that's probably the average session duration. So that means 985 posts are getting deprioritized, not going to be seen, shown to the core audience. So when you're talking about a very specific niche thing like mortgage, from an organic perspective, typically most people are going to scroll past it. Most people are not going to stop, because the algorithms see that this is for a specific niche audience. This piece of content is not meant to go viral, not meant to hit the Explorer page or to seed to more people. So that's where, local market people are going to struggle from an organic perspective. Now, if you're national, like a Ryan Serhant, he's obviously using hook points and making the content interesting for the general audience, which can be done and you can be successful with it, but it's hard. It's a lot of work. You see the team Ryan has and how long he's been doing it. The principles are very simple, but it's not necessarily easy. Versus paid advertising, you can pay to get that reach, guarantee to get that reach, and you can measure the results in real time to see what the effectiveness of that piece of content is.
So let me drill down on YouTube just one more second, because we had some questions come in, and Keith Collins, he had asked, what are the top platforms? And I think you just answered that. You're like Facebook and Instagram first and second. Any distinguish between the two, whether one should take a higher priority than the other for any?
Well, when you're dealing with advertisements, they're both the same. You can control the placements on it. Like when you run a Facebook ad, you can say, I want it to go to Facebook, I want it to go to Instagram, I want to go to Facebook and Instagram, and then there's Audience Network as well. An Audience Network is a collection of thousands of sites like Huffington Post, where you can extend that reach beyond the social platforms.
Got it. So I got one more question, then Renee. We got about 10 minutes left, Renee. So FYI on that. In terms of getting more YouTube followers, because one, we have a YouTube channel that will be the main distribution of this interview, while we do have a small live audience in our Facebook group. Most of the distribution will be on YouTube. And I had a question come in from a mortgage coach community member saying, what are the best ways to get followers on YouTube? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, again, you have to play to the algorithms. So first and foremost, your thumbnail and headline, that's the first place. Most people think that most of the traffic comes from search. It doesn't. It comes from suggested video. So when you look at suggested video and you're watching another video, it's the thumbnail and headline. So you've got to have your hooks dialed in from a thumbnail and headline perspective so you can first earn the click. Because if you don't earn the click, that's the first signal to the algorithm that they're not going to seed your content to people. So that's step number one. Then step number two is how long do you retain that audience for once you earn that click? So one of the tools that you can use that the YouTubers call is the Jenga effect. So we've all played Jenga, that game where there's the blocks and each person's pulling it out. Well, we know what's going to happen at the end. The blocks are going to fall. But with each block that's pulled off, the tension keeps building and building and building. That's the same way the algorithms are looking at content. They want to see, how do you build that tension? How long do you hold that audience for? So one of the examples I have is that one of the channels I mentioned is Graham Stephan. His number one video is how I got a Tesla for $78. So if you watch that video, he doesn't reveal the math until about 9 minutes in. And it's not like he's filling it with fluff up to that. He's a great storyteller. So I recommend everybody go watch that video. He is using the Jenga effect. He earns that click through how I got a $78 Tesla, but through his storytelling, he holds that attention. So that's really like, there's no real way to game it. Like you could run a bunch of YouTube ads if you have a self-liquidating model that leads to subscribers. But in terms of organic, those are the two things you have to focus on.
So Renee, that was a nice plug for what you do, teaching people how to tell stories. You got to have a good hook. You got to have a good thumbnail. You got to tell a good story. And then obviously, if you want to get value, you've got to have a good call to action. Go ahead, Renee.
Well, I was going to say, but it changes once you move to social, because I mean, in-person storytelling is very different in social, but in the execution of it as well. Because I've got these great videos that we produce and everything, and then we got 100 views on them. And but if I were to show them that video, if I have the captured audience and I hit play and they watch, they'll buy something for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, but it didn't capture in the social environment. So this is so valuable in thinking about like the Jenga effect, and what I'm hearing is you're capturing bites of attention one at a time. I'm going to give you 3 seconds, and then you better buy another 5. And then if you bought the 5, okay, I'll give you the 10, and you're kind of leading me through that. I mean, it's fascinating. And what I want to go back to the thing you said in the beginning, and for the listeners here, you have to research. He's telling us we have to be students of how we consume information, where instead of just being oblivious to why we scroll. Because I told somebody one time, I said, you don't think you have time? I go, watch how arrogant we are when we scroll. No, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. Oh, stop. Okay, that was good. I'm over it. No, what's that sucks, that sucks. We're constantly critiquing it. And they're doing that to us as well. And once we realize, I love that, but dive into why, and then we start kind of exploring that whole piece. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. And I guess the big question, and I mean, I could sit on here for hours, is to ask this question. I always ask this people that write books or that read books, and they say, okay, you read X book, how do you do it? And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, you read the book and it was great, but how do you do it? And I get this sort of blank look where they got the information, but they don't know how to execute. And I'm hearing formulas, I'm hearing that there's sequencing, and I know that you have some sort of formulas in this book as well. I mean, I know that I saw them, from PCM to, gosh, you're talking about, I loved when you talked about the how. And so that piece, I think, was a really good exercise. Well, how, water companies, how tap water tastes different bottle companies? Yeah, I do. That kind of sucks. Well, how it's hard to choose? This whole little exercise, could you give us a brief on the how? Because I think that, Dave, is such an applicable piece that we could have some fun with.
Yeah, so that comes from one of my advisors and partners, Ernest Lupinacci. He's one of the top creative directors in the world. He created a creative agency called Anomaly, and he's worked with Nike and Coke and Apple and all of those. But it's really starting with getting people to buy in. So, for example, it's, how when you produce a piece of content and it only generates 100 views and you put all this time and effort into it,
Yeah,
you know
happens to me all the
how,
time.
well, you know how like you can't seem to figure out what the answer is. And there's just all this content producing every day.
Drives me absolutely crazy. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, you know how you have to grab attention, hold attention, and then monetize the attention to have any success in marketing.
Yes, I'm trying to figure that out, but yeah, yes, you're speaking my language.
So let's dive into Hook Point. It's a formula that solves that particular problem. So that's what you have to do as a business professional in the mortgage industry or anything else, is you have to sit down and actually understand the person on the other side of the screen is like, what are the things that they do know that you can get them to say, yes, that is a problem. And the more that people say yes, the more they're going to buy into the reveal, which is your service or product at the end.
You know, Dave, what he's doing, he's tapping into existing frames of reference that we already have, using our current frames to guide us to the logical solution of what he's talking about. I love that.
It's so good. And guys, we could go on forever. I do have one more question. I do want to make sure, like, one of my goals with Brandan is to blow him up in the mortgage and real estate space. It's great to see that Gary's doing that. Guys, go to Brandan Kane.com. We'll put a link down below. This guy's amazing. He's got 2 great books. So I do recommend buying his books. And I even recommend, you're a mortgage professional, you want to bring leadership, just the cover of the book has value. You know, that's how to stand out in a 3-second world. So get the books. And then, I mean, he's got case studies from all kinds of big companies on here. He's got a case study from Taylor Swift. He's got a case study from Rihanna. This is a guy who knows how to get attention beyond the mortgage space. And if we're in the mortgage business and we want to get attention, remember, we're not competing with other mortgage companies. We're competing with everyone. At Mortgage Coach, like when we design a total cost analysis, we're not competing with other technology in the mortgage and real estate space. We're competing with Instagram. We're competing with other social apps that humans use. So super important to know that. So Renee, I'm going to give you one more question in a second. I do have one question. It came in. When it comes to getting people to consume content, let's just say video content, what's the difference between less edited versus more edited? You know, because we've seen some really raw videos caught on a iPhone that killed it. And then of course, some really highly produced tight ones. Any thoughts on raw, unproduced versus produced content?
Yeah, it's production quality does not really have a bearing on content working in social. It's one, do you stop the scroll in terms of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok? Like what happens in that first 3 seconds to just get somebody to stop? And it's not fancy camera lighting or any of that stuff. It's just like, what is happening in those first 3 seconds? In the case of YouTube, what is that thumbnail and headline that gets somebody to stop? And then as we just talked, it's what is the story that you are telling that holds that attention. So it's not about production and quality. Like one of the channels that catches me all the time is a channel called The Dodo, which tells stories about pets, like animal rescues and things. They do an amazing job with the hook. And then their storytelling is so good. And most of the time, the audio is not great because they're doing like Zoom call interviews, or they're cutting together images from videos caught on cell phones. So it's not really about that at the end of the day. It's not a bearing. It's like, how are you grabbing the attention and how are you holding it? That's the most important thing.
It's awesome. Renee, what's your last question, brother?
You know, there's 2 ways that I want to go, but I think I'll go this route. Storytelling in person versus storytelling socially in digital media. What's the biggest difference that you'd say that we need to, how do we transform good storytelling? Because I've seen some of the best storytellers in person just die on the vine, I'd say me included in some of those arenas, on trying to translate great storytelling in a social environment.
Well, you just understand the difference is somebody in person, they bought in. They're sitting in the seat. So they're already there. And they're not, most of the time, unless you're horrible, they're not going to get up and leave. So they're going to listen. Social media, you do not have that. They're not they're sitting on their couch, they're sitting at their desk, and you have less than 3 seconds because they can move on to the next piece of content, next piece of content. And even if they buy in for 3 seconds, if you're not really holding their attention, then you've lost it. So it's really, the difference is just the mindset of the person consuming that content of in person versus through the screen. And obviously that dictates how you open, your pacing, your tone, all of that to really hold that and play to what the algorithms are looking for.
So we could go forever. Guys, I want to remind you, go to his website. Not only is there some great information, you can sign up, get on the mailing list, but guys, he's got a course. So there, you can go beyond the book. There's a course on this, and they do consulting, and you can do consulting contracts for less than $10,000. And I would love to see mortgage coaches create some of the most consumed, some of those valuable content in mortgage and real estate space. So highly recommend you read the book, you follow the content, you get more information here. Brandan, any final thoughts you want to share with the community, knowing that it's loan officers and realtors, before we wrap it?
Yeah, I would just say that the principles we talked today apply to any industry. So don't think that, oh, because we work with big celebrities or corporations, it doesn't apply to you. Is the formulas and the systems that we have play across the board, because at the end of the day, you're a storyteller. You're trying to tell a story about why people should work with you. You're solving a problem. So the systems and the structures apply to anything that you do in business.
It's been a great interview. Lots of takeaways, great wisdom. Appreciate you, brother. Folks, if you're watching this, give it a like, share this with your mortgage friends. I'm looking forward to seeing some success stories from this. So please, if you take some of the ideas you heard from today's call and you put them into action, let us know in our Facebook group, Mortgage Coach Productivity Mastermind. Take care, everybody. This is a wrap. And Renee,
Thanks,
thank
Brandan.
you. Thank you for referring me to this book. Thank you for helping me with this interview. And then Todd Brilliant, Mr. Super Nice Club Guy, thank you for introducing me to Brandan. Really appreciate you, brother. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Brandan.
Thank you, Brandan.
Thank you.